Professor Robin Banerjee, please, first. He's from the School of Psychology, University of Sussex. I notice you're the Director of CRESS Research. I just wonder if you could give us a very quick idea of what that is, because that sounds intriguing, and I'm sure it's not about plants.
So I am a professor of developmental psychology at the University of Sussex. I've been there a long time. I'm actually the head of the School of Psychology now. We're a very, very big school of psychology covering the full range and spectrum of psychological research. But my particular interest is in children's relationships, emotions, and social skills. So that's what CRESS stands for. And I've been doing a lot of work in that area. And today, what I want to do in my very short slice of time is talk a little bit about kindness. And I'm so pleased that you've got an event which is focused on kindness and trust and co-production, because I want to try and make the case social and emotional dimensions matter. And I'm probably preaching to the converted here. But that's very pleasing as well. And hopefully some of what I've got to say will be interesting. One thing I should say right at the outset is that you may have seen there was a big launch last summer. I think it was between August and October, end of August and October, of something called the Kindness Test, which was a major public science project on kindness in partnership with Claudia Hammond, an ex-Sussex student, alumnus of Sussex. She works for BBC, does a lot of work on the radio, particularly Radio 4, and they worked with us to develop this public science project on kindness. And actually tonight we're recording the show describing the results of that program, and it will be broadcast next week. So please do look out next week. We're just 1 week too late, Dan, because if we were next week, I would have been able to share some of the results, but it's all strictly embargoed until next Wednesday. But do look out for that from next week onwards. However, I do want to talk a little bit about the background that I have. My focus has been on children and young people's mental health and well-being. And I suppose one fundamental thing which chimes really nicely with a focus on co-production is that, of course, I take a very fundamentally relational approach to mental health and well-being of young people. That might sound really obvious, but you would, I'm sure, encounter, if you're working in education or health services or social care, you'd encounter some occasions where you feel like actually relationships aren't in the picture at all. The focus is very much an individualized one, where it's like mental health just resides inside the child's head, and that's where it is. And I want to try and challenge that narrative all the time to say that actually the unit of analysis shouldn't be the young person in a silo. It should be the young person as embedded within the relational network that surrounds them. So it's all about their relationships with others in their families, in their communities, in their schools, in their neighborhoods, and so on. And once you take that relational network, it really helps because it makes you recognize that this isn't just about an individual young person with their mental health issues on one side and then everything else on the other end. Like quite often I'm doing work in schools and the focus is very much, in many cases, on the sort of academic standards agenda. The focus is on achievement outcomes. And I've been very pleased to be working in Wales over the last 10 years, and particularly working on the new curriculum for Wales. It's definitely some challenges there, but what it does do is it positions relationships and health and well-being right at the center, recognizing that actually schooling, education, what we're learning together about is fundamentally relational. And that really, really helps to kind of convey the idea of a very holistic picture. It's the young person as a whole, not treating mental health as if it's just one sort of extra thing to think about when the real focus is on achievement. Now, looking at relationships is absolutely crucial. I do a lot of work around peer relationships. So this is a visual representation of peer relationships. This is an actual year 5 class, although the names are made up. This is a year 5 class, 9 to 10-year-old children, and each of the arrows indicates positive nominations. Who you most like to play with, who you most like to spend free time with or hang out with. We ask slightly different questions depending on ages. And you can see this remarkable variation that exists within social groups. This is the reality of children's social lives, just like it is for every one of us as adults within a workplace or within our communities. Some children receive lots and lots of positive nominations. Loads of kids want to play with Nadia. But then you've got, look, Rio here. He says, I most like to hang out with Nathan, Joseph, and Chris. Not one single person nominates him back. Right? And we know that these patterns of rejection occur. And yes, it can be volatile, it can change within a day. However, sometimes I think we all know, working in this area, we all know that this can become very entrenched for some young people. Where does kindness come in? Well, we've done a lot of work which shows that kindness is right at the heart of our relationships. It's not a fluffy, extra nice, warm, fuzzy feeling that you can just make time for when you've done the real serious stuff. I'm going to make the point that actually kindness is the serious stuff. It really is the serious stuff. It's the bedrock of our relationships. And it comes in really, really strongly. I do a lot of work on children's social cognition, the so-called theory of mind, understanding other mental states, empathy, tuning into others. And early social understanding, which is promoted within the family context, is predictive of kindness, of pro-social behavior, which in turn is a really strong predictor of children's peer relationships. Kindness is a glue that connects people together. Now, if I had more time, I would love to talk with you about the fact that some other stuff gets in the way. Most notably, perceptions of popularity often focus around dominance and power. And those are absolutely not the same thing as kindness, but those are the perceptions of popularity and social success. But when you turn to the qualities that make up profoundly positive relationships, actually kindness is front and center. Now, kindness is more than just the behaviors. And notice, these are some of the different definitions that are out there, but notice that one of the fundamental things is the stance that you take towards other people. And children learn this in their early lives, and it continues to develop through their lifespan. The social environment makes a massive difference to whether there is that intention to benefit others, to be compassionate towards others, to be concerned about others. It's not just doing something or giving something. It's the orientation that you have in the first place. As you can see from that nice quote at the end, it's not just the pro-social acts, it's also the underlying motivations. And this is evident in spades. We published a paper a couple of years ago where we just talked with adolescents about this. And I was really skeptical at the beginning of this about whether young people would actually engage with this. And it was quite the opposite. I mean, Jess Cotney, wonderful PhD student of mine, when she was working on this for a PhD, and I'm sure part of it was her real talent in terms of engaging with young people. But what she's found was that actually this was sparking something really profound for the young people. They really engaged with the idea of kindness. In some ways, more than the work I'd been doing previously, which was around all mental health awareness and so on. Because this really had this immediate intuitive appeal. They knew what kindness was to them. They knew what it felt like when someone was kind to them. And they knew what it felt like when someone was unkind to them as well. So yes, there was helping, emotional support and so on. But look at this sophistication from the teenagers or what they told us. They also told us that kindness is also about forgiveness. It's also about honesty, sometimes telling tough truths, right? And was also about fundamentally those relationships. And a whole range of things influence kindness. Sometimes it's prompted by specific needs that you see in other people. Sometimes you just do it because, and there's no particular trigger for it, although I'd question whether anything really is random in an act of kindness. But fundamentally, it's this one. It's the focus on other people and that orientation towards the relationships. And I suppose the question I always ask, and this is very relevant to co-production, is how much do we really orient towards other people as opposed to treating individuals as sort of self-contained beings, right? This, I'm sure you'll all know, the impacts of kindness are not just there for the recipient, they're also there for the giver as well. And that's why you get these kinds of effects. emotional benefits, social relational benefits, a sense of gratitude, and all of that gives rise to the sense of contagion. And of course, it's not just the work that we've been doing in this area. There have been studies over many, many years looking at kindness and how it promotes well-being. There was a lovely meta-analysis of studies a couple of years ago by Oliver Curry and colleagues, showing that overall, yes, acts of kindness not only benefit the receiver, but they also promote well-being. A lovely set of experiments by colleagues in Canada focusing on how this was actually giving people money to spend. Spending money on others, it turns out, buying other people a treat increases well-being more than buying yourself a treat. You know, these really simple demonstrations. And now, I mean, when you think about the terrible things taking place in the world, we're surrounded by images of extraordinary destruction and difficulty, but we also know that there are incredible, sometimes in those very same situations, you see incredible acts of kindness and connection with others. And we've been able to demonstrate from research across a number of different disciplines that actually things like doom scrolling and focusing on the negative versus focusing on the positives actually have very, very different kinds of effects on our own mental health and well-being. So I guess what I want to say here is that we need to recognize that kindness is a foundation for our connections with other people. And that in turn leads to one fundamental quality, which is trust. The relationships built on trust start with kindness. And so we need to understand how we can promote that better. And co-production is one of the key ways in which we can do it, especially with groups that have been facing particular vulnerabilities and challenges and adversities. I am going to skip through this slide because I just have very little time. I'm going to try and wrap up in 1 minute just to say, if we want to move the attention from what was on my previous slide, which was all about extrinsic motivational goals, and we focus on these fundamentally intrinsic values in our lives, value of health, the value of developing as people, self-development, and fundamentally the point I was saying about before, community belonging, then we need to satisfy some basic human needs. So this is one theoretical approach, self-determination theory, which talks about how we need to look at the environments that we create and consider whether those environments that we have created and shaped for our young people actually promote relatedness, a sense of autonomy, and a sense of competence. And we've recently done quite a lot of this work in the context of creative arts. We've done a lot of work with marginalized young people, focusing on whether the everyday environment, when we're working with creative arts with young people, can support basic psychological needs. And these are some of the things that come through in our recent papers. Self-expression, freedom of choice, a validation of competence, but not saying everything is easy. Actually, challenge is really important as well. But fundamentally, underneath it all is this notion of building a community based on this kindness, based on this trust. And I'm just going to close by encouraging you to look at one project that we were engaged with here at University of Sussex, which was during the COVID lockdown periods. We focused on the impact of COVID-19 on care leavers. And we worked with a creative collective led by a wonderful Valerie Dunn. And also my colleague here at Sussex, Helen Drew, in the psychology school. And this was a co-production piece based around creativity, focused on the daily life and well-being of care leavers. If you want to find out more, there are some really lovely things which were co-produced by the young people. This is just a snapshot of the guidance that they were giving each other, actually, and were giving to the relevant local services. Please do visit on the web Beyond Lockdown Sussex, and you'll be able to find out more. But I just think this is a lovely example of how through the co-production activity, we were able to find a way to take us from the kindness as a foundation through to trusting connections, to build relationships that make a positive difference. Wow, that was my whirlwind tour. Did I get it done in 15 minutes?
That was superb.
Yes.
Thank you, Robin.
Yes. Thank
Well
you.
Awesome.
Can I do what Dan did earlier and take a thing as a